For this video, I want to go over what I think are 9 of the best aquarium plants for beginners. I keep all of the featured plants in my own aquarium, so I do have hands-on experience with all of them. I don't run CO2 or high-powered lighting in any of my tanks, and I only use liquid fertilizer in my 40-gallon tank, so all of these are great options for people new to keeping planted tanks. So I want to start with stem plants because I do think stem plants help to overcome some common mistakes people new to the hobby make, because they're rapid growth rate can use up excess nutrients in your tank's water and help keep your water parameters safe and stable for your fish. So that means I have to start with Rotala Rotundifolia, which is my current favourite stem plant in the hobby, and it's been absolutely bulletproof for me. I keep this plant in everything from my room temperature very low light shrimp jar to my medium light 40-gallon tank with aqua soil, and it just grows and grows and grows. I also have it in my 8-gallon Wallstad tank too, as its faster growth rate helps to use up a large amount of the nitrogen compounds in the water and keep the tank's water parameters safe for my better fish. That said, the faster growth rate of this plant does mean that it will need trimming once or even twice per month in most tank setups, so keep that in mind. The fast growth rate of Rotala Rotundifolia does make it very easy to propagate this plant though. You simply trim off the excess growth from the top of the stem and then replant those cuttings back into your substrate, and a new stem will just grow and grow and grow. Given enough time, you can actually purchase a single set of Rotala Rotundifolia stems and keep trimming them and then replanting those trimmings in your aquarium to fill it out to keep your costs low. When left to grow, I've had my Rotala Rotundifolia be able to get to around 16 inches or 40 centimeters in length, so this can get very big for the background of your tank if needed. Unlike something like Hygrophila polysperma that grows out in random directions and may cause issues due to blocking light to the plants below it, Rotala Rotundifolia has a predictable vertical growth pattern, make it easier to plant into your aquascape. Thankfully, Rotala Rotundifolia is cheap and easy to find in most stores, while also being very hardy and easy to keep, making it a great plant for beginners. Next up is Bacopa caroliniana, and this is the perfect option for anyone looking for a low maintenance stem plant for their tank. This is easily the slowest growing stem plant I have ever kept in any of my tanks, and it's taken around 3 months for this stem to grow from 4 inches up to 8 inches in my low light guppy tank with aqua soil. Most other stem plants in the hobby will need trimming once or twice per month, whereas Bacopa usually needs to be trimmed once every 2 to 3 months. This drastically reduces the maintenance requirements of the plant and lets you use your time for other tasks on your tank. I've had my Bacopa caroliniana get to around 12 inches or 30 centimeters before I started to trim it, but I do think it could probably get a little longer than this if you just leave it in your tank. So again, if given enough time, this can easily fill out the background of your tank. The slow growth rate of this particular stem plant does come with a downside though, as it doesn't use up as many of the nutrients in your tank's water column as some other popular stem plants, making it a poor option for Wallstad tanks. Bacopa caroliniana is also very easy to propagate yourself. You simply trim the excess plant from the top and replant those trimmings into your substrate and just wait for it to grow. I've kept this in low and medium light tanks, and it's always been very hardy and easy to keep for me, making it perfect for beginners. The popularity of Bacopa caroliniana does seem to be increasing in the hobby too, so it is becoming easier to find in stores. Next up is Ludwigia, specifically Ludwigia mini super red, but there are some other easy variants of Ludwigia out there. This can be the perfect plant for anyone looking to add a pop of red to their aquarium, but full disclosure, this is the only red stem plant I've ever kept, so I'm not going to try and say it's the easiest option in the hobby. Still, this plant has done well for me in almost all of the tanks that I've kept it in, regardless of the lighting or the substrate that I've used. It is having some issues in my Wallstad tank, but I do think that this is more to do with the capping layer of fine gravel being too thick and the roots of the plant not being able to hit the topsoil below it yet. My 29-gallon tank uses a similar setup with fine gravel and topsoil, but the fine gravel layer is far thinner, and the Ludwigia mini super red in here seems to be thriving so far. This plant did particularly well in my old 40-gallon scape that had relatively low light and fluval stratum as its substrate, so I am confident in saying it's a great red plant for beginners. Again, you can propagate this plant by trimming the excess plant off the top of the stem and then replanting those cuttings into your substrate, but unlike the other stem plants I've done this with, Ludwigia mini super red does seem to slow its growth after a trimming session, so keep this in mind. Unfortunately, the main downside of Ludwigia mini super red does seem to be its availability, as it's commonly sold out in my area, and even online it does come back in stock and then sells out quickly, so if you can see this Anubias available for sale, get it quickly. Moving on to floating plants, as these are another excellent option for beginners because their easy access to CO2 from the air helps to encourage a rapid growth rate of the plant. This rapid growth rate helps to absorb huge amounts of nitrogen compounds from your aquarium water, helping to maintain safe and stable water parameters for your fish. I actually have a dedicated video going over my experiences with various popular floating plants that I link in the card and description. For this video though, I want to focus on Salvinia articulata, but there are a few other variants of Salvinia in the hobby that also work just as well. Currently I have Salvinia in all of my aquariums as well as my shrimp jar, and I think the benefits of this plant drastically outweigh the negatives. In my experience, this plant only really has two negatives, with the first being its rapid growth rate causing you to have to remove large amounts of this plant every single week or it will end up dominating the surface. Unfortunately, in some of my setups, having Salvinia cover the surface of the tank has caused problems with light penetration to the plants beneath it, particularly Limnophilia sessiliflora and various types of crypt. This is why I use floating plant rings in some of my aquariums so I can control where the Salvinia will sit on the surface of my tank, letting me control the light penetration beneath it. On the flip side of this though, the rapid growth rate of Salvinia means it's absorbing a huge amount of nitrogen compounds such as ammonia and nitrate from your aquarium, helping to keep your tank water safe and stable for all of your fish. On top of this, some species of fish do appreciate floating plants in their tank as it makes them feel safe and secure in their home. Another additional benefit if you keep shrimp is that my shrimp love to hang upside down on the Salvinia and graze on the algae, biofilm and trapped food amongst its leaves. In my experience, this has been an extremely hardy plant that is very easy to keep in a wide range of different tank and light setups. Keep in mind this is a floating plant, so it is on the surface of your water right next to your aquarium light, so it can do well in very low light setups. Moving on to rhizome plants, and these are one of the easiest types of plants to keep in your aquarium because usually there's no need to worry about a nutrient rich substrate as these are attached to your hardscape and they'll feed from your tank's water column. This means that you don't have to worry about using some kind of topsoil and capping it with gravel or getting some expensive aqua soil. You can literally use some inert gravel or sand like in this particular betta tank I keep, and then use a ton of rhizome plants in the aquarium. Most people could probably guess that Anubias was going to be featured in this video, but rather than just saying Anubias is in the entire genus because some are very easy to keep and in my experience some aren't, I want to specifically focus on Anubias callidifolia. Before I go any further, I just want to say I do have a dedicated video going over all of the different types of Anubias I've kept, and I'll link to that in the card and description if you want to check it out. But I honestly think that Anubias callidifolia is one of the best variants of Anubias out there, as it's been very hardy for me, it is cheap and it's easy to keep, and it thrives in very low powered lights. Unlike some variants of Anubias that can get very big, Anubias callidifolia usually maxes out at around 6 inches or 15 centimeters, making it a great option for most planted tank setups. One of my favourite things about this particular version of Anubias is the large leaves that are usually only found on the larger variants of Anubias. This lets you use the relatively small plant that will provide hiding spots for your fish and grazing spots for your shrimp, even if you do have a smaller aquarium. One common mistake that people make time and time again with Anubias is planting it in their substrate, but this can cause the rhizome to rot and eventually the plant may melt, so just attach it to your hardscape with glue, thread, or just jam it in place. Once the rhizome of the plant gets long enough, you can split it in two to propagate it and get 2 plants out of one, but due to the slow growth rate of Anubias, this can take months to get to a suitable length to split. The slow growth rate of Anubias callidifolia also means that it's a very low maintenance plant, making it the perfect option for people looking for something that they don't need to trim constantly. On the flip side of this though, the slow growth rate also means that it doesn't really use up many nitrogen compounds in your tank, so you will need a decent filter, but it doesn't have to be an expensive canister filter, it can be a decent cheap sponge filter. In my experience, Anubias callidifolia does usually sell out quickly due to its popularity, so if you do want this plant, get it as soon as you see it available. If you can't find Anubias callidifolia for sale in your area, then Anubias coinleaf and Anubias glabra also work well in most tank setups in my opinion. Another plant that most people would probably guess would be featured in this this video is Java Fern, and in my opinion this is pretty much the gold standard for planted tanks, as it's cheap, easy to find in stores, extremely hardy, and in my opinion it looks great. Remember, Java Fern should be attached to your hardscape rather than planted in your substrate, but other than that this plant has been bulletproof for me and it's very easy to keep. I've personally kept Java Fern in both low and moderate light tanks, both with and without liquid fertilizer, and it consistently does well and just grows and grows and grows. The long leaves of this plant offer plenty of hiding spots for your fish as well as grazing spots for your shrimp, making it an excellent option for most setups. Don't worry about these little spots forming on the leaves of your Java Fern. It's not a problem or an infection with the plant, it's totally normal and it's actually part of the propagation process. These tiny black spots will eventually start to grow roots like this one, and over time they'll turn into these tiny little Java Fern plantlets that you can then remove from the leaf and attach to your hardscape to get a baby Java Fern. Apparently regular Java Fern can get as tall as 12 inches or 30 centimeters, but in my tanks it usually maxes out at around 8 inches or 20 centimeters, regardless of the lighting or the use of liquid fertilizers. Regular Java Fern is an excellent middle of the road plant where it's not really the best at anything, but it's also not really the worst at anything either, making it a great pickup for beginners. There are a few Java Fern variants out there right now. For example, I keep Java Fern Trident and India Green Gnome that are both smaller than regular Java Fern, better suited to smaller tank setups. On the flip side of that, I also used to keep Java Fern Latifolia in my old 29-gallon setup, and that is a slightly larger variant that is better suited for larger tanks. In my experience though, these three variants and regular Java Fern have all been bulletproof and very easy to keep, making them excellent plants for your tank. Next up is Bucephalandra, and just like Java Fern and Anubias, there's a huge number of these out there right now. One of the main advantages of Bucephalandra over Java Fern and Anubias is that it also has a wide colour range for the plant. Again, you'll attach your Bucephalandra to your hardscape rather than plant it in your substrate, or you may have problems. Bucephalandra Kedagang is my personal favourite, and I love the colour. It's pretty cheap and it's very easy to find in my area. Unlike most Bucephalandra variants that usually only max out at around 4 inches or 10 centimeters, Bucephalandra Kedagang can get around 8 inches or 20 centimeters, but it is a very slow grower. I also keep Bucephalandra Thea Green, Bucephalandra Sintang and Bucephalandra Red Scorpio, so there's plenty of colour variation out there if you want to use it for colour pops in your aquarium. With most of the Bucephalandra variants being on the smaller size, this is usually used as more of a decorative or detailing plant in your aquarium rather than something for natural water purification or hiding spots for your fish, but I absolutely love the look of this plant. Every Bucephalandra variant that I've kept in my tanks has been extremely hardy and very easy to keep in my water, but I have seen people online say they've had the exact opposite with this plant. If you do like the look of Bucephalandra, it's probably a good idea to get one of the cheaper, easier to find versions of the plant just to try it in your aquarium to see how it'll respond to your tank water. Moving on, we get to cryptocoryne plants, and I know that there's a huge number of different crypts out there in the hobby these days, but I want to specifically focus on Crypt Wentii for this video. That said, even within the Crypt Wentii variant of the plant, there's plenty of different variants out there, but I currently keep Crypt Wentii Tropica and Crypt Wentii Green, and both have done very well in my tanks. So sticking with Crypt Wentii Tropica and Wentii Green, and both of these have been slow growers for me with a slow growth rate, but until recently I have only kept these in low light tanks, so this may change now they're in medium light setups. One important thing to note about Crypt Wentii is that different variants of the plant can max out at different heights, but usually they'll get to between 6 and 8 inches or 15 to 20 centimeters, but there are some that are larger and some that are smaller. Crypt Wentii Tropica has a browner colour to it, and as the name suggests, Crypt Wentii Green is a green plant that should maintain the solid green colour regardless of the light intensity in its tank. Although people do often say that crypts are heavy root feeders and need root tabs in your tank to thrive, I've seen plenty of follow-alongs on various forums, and I'll link to one in the video description where they grow their plants without root tabs or liquid fertilizers and they really don't seem to be fussed. Cryptocorynes can melt in some setups, and this is totally perfectly normal when you initially add the plant to your aquarium, as the plant needs to shed its immersed grown leaves and regrow submerged leaves. In my experience, around 50% of all my crypts melt and regrow within about a month or two, but you can get lucky and have none of the crypts melt in your tank. If you do get yourself some cryptocoryne plants and add them to your tank and then notice that their leaves are starting to melt, try not to worry and definitely don't remove the plant, as you should see healthy new growth within a couple of weeks. Now, I am a big fan of crypts, so if you don't like the look of Crypt Wentii, you could try Crypt Willisii, Crypt Petchii or Crypt Hobbit, because in my experience those three have also been very easy to keep. Next up is Echinodorus aquatica, and some people do avoid Echinodorus or sword plants because they think they'll always get huge if they have a smaller tank, but Echinodorus aquatica does stay nice and small. This is a cultivar plant specifically developed for its smaller size, and it usually maxes out at around 8 inches or 20 centimeters. I've had this one in my low light guppy tank with fluval stratum substrate and no root tabs for 7 or 8 months now, and it's pretty much fully grown. As you can see, it's in a 12 US gallon or 45 litre tank, and there is still plenty of space in here for my fish to swim around without the plant dominating the setup. In my experience, Echinodorus aquatica has been very hardy and easy to keep, and I like it so much that I just purchased 2 new ones for my 40-gallon scape. These are only a few weeks old, and as you can see they are still showing their immersed leaves while their submerged leaves start to grow in. As you can see on the one in my guppy tank that I've had for months though, the submerged leaves of this plant do have a nice size and shape to them, providing plenty of hiding spots for your fish. I really love the specific shade of green on this plant too, as most aquarium plants that I've personally kept are a little darker than this, so this does make it stand out in your aquarium. The main downside of this plant in my opinion is supply issues, because it seems to be extremely popular right now, and a few months ago these were in all of the shops, but right now they're a nightmare to find, and it actually took me a few weeks just to find the 2 I've added to my 40-gallon tank. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. I hope you found it helpful and that you can check out some of these plants in your own tanks. Thanks for watching and have a good day.